Hello, my name is Claudia Pellegrini. I am an English teacher from Meran, which is a small town in northern Italy. I come from a region which borders to Austria and Switzerland and where the population speaks German, Italian, and in some parts also Latin. I'm here to speak about some findings of my doctoral study, and the title of this presentation is What Polyglots Can Teach Us About Language Maintenance. I will first speak about my research journey and its difficulties, the research questions, my definition of the term polyglot. Then I will introduce you to the Dynamic Model of Multilingualism, which is the theoretical framework of my study, and to some key concepts of the DMM that are related to language maintenance, and then finally go over to the research setting, the participants, the instruments that are used, and to findings on language maintenance. And as an English teacher, I am also interested in the lessons that can be applied to the classroom. So this is a very personal picture. It was taken in Thessaloniki in 2016 at the Polyglot Conference. In it, you can see an old sailing boat called thalassa, which is the Greek word for sea. And here in the back, you can see Mount Olympus. So here this boat, which is heading towards Olympus, to me represented and visualized my goals in research. And the poem that Ithaca by Konstantinos Petru-Kavafis was the poem and the motto that kept me going and overcome all the obstacles that I have encountered on my way. And the first lines of the poems say, as you set out for Ithaca, hope the voyage is a long one, full of adventure, full of discovery. Keep Ithaca always in your mind. Arriving there is what you're destined for. And now we'll share some of the discoveries with you. I had formulated some research questions. The first one regarded terminology. So how would the participants in the polyglot events define a polyglot or a hyperpolyglot? What did they perceive distinguished a polyglot from a multilingual? And which alternative terms do they use to describe themselves? Research question 2 and 3 regarded language maintenance. And so how do they maintain their psycholinguistic system? Which importance do they attach to language maintenance? What role does multilingual awareness play in the sense? Which maintenance strategies do they employ? And which factors play a major role in the maintenance of such complex psycholinguistic systems? I have encountered many difficulties in my research journey since I had decided to explore two under-researched fields. One was language maintenance from a psycholinguistic perspective. So far, language maintenance was always investigated from a social-linguistic perspective. And the other under-researched field was polyglottism. 3 scholars also say that it is a shame that polyglottism is in academia regarded as a fringe phenomenon beyond the interest of traditional academia. Algüelles, in his preface to one of the books of Catolom, says it's regrettable that few linguists have studied polyglots and what they know about language learning. And Hiltenstam, who has conducted some studies on polyglottism from a second language acquisition viewpoint, also says that it's paradoxical since the study of these language learners that excel in the L2 acquisition could reveal us important factors also for the typical L2 acquisition. I fully agree with them. And yes, and now this is the first harbor in my research journey. I'm Italian, and so I decided that I wanted to go for the best Italian polyglot and probably the best polyglot ever, and that is Cardinal Mezzofanti. So I set out my research journey to Bologna, where I went into the archive where all his documents are kept. They're kept in the Fondo Speciale in the Biblioteca dell'Archiginnasio. Here you can see the big folders in which his multilingual documents are kept, and here you see his neat handwriting, and I must say this was the most thrilling experience I have had leafing through his handwritten notes and documents and papers. And here is a picture of the famous portrait that you can always see. This was the portrait hung in the director's office, and Mr. Nerozzi gave me the permission to photograph it. The first part of my studies was centered around the terminology issue in academia. Scholars define monoglots, bilinguals, multilinguals, polyglots in a great numbers of ways, which I found very confusing. Because you must know I am an English teacher, and only at the age of 49 I have decided to take up my doctoral studies. And when I was first confronted with all these papers with in which the definitions of the terms was used so differently, this was very confusing to me. So I wanted to shed some light in this, and at the end of my, especially in the terms multilingual and polyglot, and some scholars think they can be used interchangeably and synonymously, while I am more in line with scholars like Hiltenstam or with Professor Argüelles, who claim that a distinction between multilinguals and polyglots should be made. This is the definition I came up in 2020 when I graduated, and I claimed that a polyglot is an experienced autonomous learner of many languages who is characterized by a lifelong passion for language learning and an enhanced multilingual awareness. A high motivation and open-minded attitudes towards other languages and cultures, perseverance and self-discipline are characteristic features of a polyglot. As you can see, I give no numbers. Because of the non-categorical nature of languages, it's very difficult to give numbers. And since I come from the DMM school, I do not agree with giving numbers and seeing numbers as isolated units, but I share the holistic view of the psycholinguistic system, which comprises different language subsystems, and so I did not give any number. Also knowing that polyglots like Cardinal Mezzofanti never gave numbers when they were asked to list the numbers they had learned. His nephew, after his death, had claimed that his uncle had learned about 114 languages, Others said he knew at least 72 languages. 72 are the languages that existed after the fall of the Tower of Babel. Mezzofanti himself only said once before he went to Rome to become cardinal that he knew 50 languages plus his Bolognese dialect. When he then went to Rome and also worked for the propaganda there, then his language acquisition simply exploded. Now, after 3 years, I would go more for an easier and simpler definition, and such as a polyglot is a smart learner of many languages who is characterized by a lifelong passion for language learning. I'm now going to present you the Dynamic Model of Multilingualism, which is the theoretical background of my study. It was developed by Philipp Herdiner and Ulrike Jessner in 2002. It's a psycholinguistic model, and it's the first one to apply complex dynamic system theory on the research on multilingualism and language acquisition. And it is able to model language-related processes and to predict multilingual development. So it considers also phenomena such as negative growth, language maintenance, multilingual awareness, cross-linguistic influence, and autocatalytic changes emerging from the system itself. So it does not focus on single languages, but on language systems, which are comprised, which interact among each other and interact and influenced also the unifying language system of the individual. So you can see there is a dynamic interaction of among the systems, and it takes a holistic view to understand this. One key term in the DMM is the M factor or multilingualism factor. So these are all the qualities that emerge in a multilingual person due to the increased contact of his or her languages. And it comprises two components: multilingual awareness, which comprises metalinguistic awareness and cross-linguistic awareness, and is responsible, for instance, also for the catalytic effect in language learning. And then the enhanced multilingual monitor, which describe all the languages monitoring and management skills, so the ability to integrate and to separate language resources and to balance them with the communicative needs. So the DMM focuses on language development and posits that not always the development follows a positive and linear path, but that there are also phases of negative growth, and these happen if not enough time and energy are spent on the maintenance of these language systems. And so language maintenance impacts the stability of this psycholinguistic system. And the phenomenon of language attrition, as it is described in linguistics, in the DMM is called gradual language loss. The DMM predicts that linguistic systems are affected to unequal degree. So in well-developed language systems, in which the speakers have a high language competence, this phenomenon will set in later and is less recognizable, while in underdeveloped systems, so in so-called partial systems, the effects will be more visible. So what does the multilingual individual have to do to keep the stability of his or her psycholinguistic system? And this depends on the perceived communicative needs. If the speaker feels that he has to invest more or less energy, he will make this an effort to make these adjustments. And this effort is called the language maintenance effort. And it is determined by two factors, by the language use and by language awareness. The DMM predicts that with the accumulation of linguistic knowledge, the amount of language maintenance effort will increase. So the more languages I learn, the greater the language maintenance effort has to be if I want to keep my system stable. And so a lot of time and energy will have to be invested into the maintenance of this system and of the stability of the system. And this will have consequences on the language acquisition effort that I make. If I want to learn more and new languages, I will have to make time and invest energy, which I will have invested into the maintenance before. And so speakers, if they want to learn more, continue to learn more languages like polyglots, they will have to try to reduce and minimize the language maintenance effort. They can do so by focusing, for instance, on domain-specific language skills instead of focusing on all language skills. And what is very important is the management of the time and energy resources. So the title of my presentation and of my doctoral thesis, which is called "What Polyglots Can Teach Us: Language Maintenance in Multilinguals from a Dynamic Model of Multilingualism Perspective," is leaned on Rubin's seminal article, "What a Good Language Learner Can Teach Us." Rubin, in 1975, was convinced that the strategy of the good language learner can be transferred to low-achieving language learners. So what is the good language learner? Jesner, for instance, defines the good language learner as one who is both experienced and able to make use of his or her multilingual competencies as a strategic resource to manage and steer further lifelong language learning. So lifelong language learning is very often the case of polyglots. And together with Elisabeth Allgäuer-Hackel, I claimed in an article that polyglots certainly can be regarded as experienced language learners. Now to my today's study. I selected them at international polyglot events. The criteria were participants should have been met in person. They should be able to speak 6 or more language systems and which belong to at least 3 or more language families. The number 6 stems from the fact that in many studies, the number 6 seems to be the number of languages which cannot be naturally acquired in certain areas. And I also wanted to study extreme cases like some modern mezzofantis with 20, 30 or even more language systems in their repertoire, since this would show the relevance and complexity of language maintenance at its best. I did not know whom I was going to meet. I did not know how these conferences and events were organized, but I wanted to select my participants if they had aroused my attention, either in the talks or in informal conversations or on the internet. The proficiency certainly was no selection criterion. How could I assess their proficiency with standardized tests? I wanted my participants to belong to different age groups, and the gender distribution was no priority of mine. Okay, and these were then the second and the third harvest of my journey to Ithaca. And the second harbor was in Thessaloniki at the Polyglot Conference in 2016. And the second was the Polyglot Gathering in Bratislava in 2017. 18 participants agreed to help me and to become my studies subjects. And you will see, and also they allowed me to use their names. Two wanted to remain anonymous. And here you will see some people that you all know. There are some Polyglot Conference organizers like Richard Simcott, Alex Rawling, or Professor Alexander Argüelles. There are some fine and famous polyglots like Helen Abadzi, who was a speaker at the Polyglot Conference in Thessaloniki and who is also mentioned in Erard's book. There are many others that became, were just, let's call them ordinary participants in the conference, but which turned out to have a more prominent role in the events to come, where they have become singers of multiple languages, or in which they have become speakers. Quite interesting is that they come from 9 different countries, from Belarus, France, Greece, Italy, Mexico, Sweden, Russia, United Kingdom, and the USA. They belong to different age groups, so most participants were aged between 20 and 40, but I had also participants which were older than 40 and 50, and one even older than 60. And gender distribution was was not very balanced, since I have only 4 female polyglots. What I have showed you is that all these people, if you study adult multilingualism, things start getting very complex. Most studies are conducted with pupils or students who have at least the same educational context, may come from the same area. Here I have people who have very diverse life trajectories, come from very different social cultural backgrounds. They have had widely differing initial language learning conditions in the family of origin and in their educational context. Most of them said in the semi-structured interview that they had, no, in the questionnaire, sorry, that they had been raised monolingually, which is was quite surprising to me, since I had expected them to come from a more multilingual family. But only one participant had a family in which multiple languages were spoken. Others had learned them, as the participant claimed, most of their languages after their tertiary education, so later in life. Very few have learned several languages in secondary education. So I had asked them to list the language systems that they had explored. And you can see a great variety of languages. And 2 participants had studied only Indo-European languages, 16 non-Indo-European languages that are spoken in the Middle East, Asia, Africa, Central America. I had also asked a question about constructed languages and sign languages and classical languages. And again, we have 4 people who have learned Esperanto or Tokipona, British or American Sign Language, and 7 interviewees had also studied classical language like ancient Greek or Latin or Sanskrit. And Professor Argüelles, so participant number 5, had also listed a lot of other classical languages like Old Norse, Old High German, Old English, Middle English, Old Swedish, Gothic, etc., etc. And so 72%, so this is the blue and the orange section, had explored between 7 to 15 languages. So the majority had explored these languages. Then we have people with 6% who had studied between 21 and 25 languages, and 17% between 23 and 28, and then 11%, and this is our Professor Argüelles and Simcott, who had studied and explored more than 40 and 50 languages. I had asked them to rate their proficiency by themselves. I asked them to use some numbers, so which were 1 for elementary, 5 to advanced, to rate their proficiency, because I did not know if the participants, whom I did not know before I set out for Thessaloniki, would be familiar with the levels of the European that are used in the current European BSSR levels. So here you can see again lots of beautiful languages, and you can see that this question was relevant not because I was interested in the proficiency, but I wanted to know if there are which languages systems are well developed and which they feel are less developed, since this would have an effect on language maintenance. Here I compiled then a list of all the language for each participant. Not surprisingly, an individual like Richard, who had learned more than 50 languages, was not able to list them. And in fact, he just said, okay, he spoke about language families. He says, I have learned most Romance languages, most Slavic languages, most Germanic languages, many Celtic languages, Baltic languages, etc. Professor Argüelles, who also has explored so many languages, he too thinks in language families and listed the language families that he had learned. And this is quite in line with what I had expected to find in people who have so many languages that in their repertoire. And Richard also claimed that it was impossible for him to describe proficiency levels, since they change constantly, and he uses languages to varying degrees. So he has 5 languages he speaks on a daily basis: English, Macedonian, French, Spanish, and German. But then in all the languages, there are differences in passive and active abilities. And this again confirms my assumptions. Research too regarded language maintenance. Although I had asked no explicit question about gradual language loss, 17 out of 18 participants reported on the phenomenon of gradual language loss, either as a general phenomenon or as something that they had experienced themselves, or as something they had observed in other polyglots. Here is an extract from the semi-structured interview of Luca Lampariello, in which he speaks about Chinese. And he says that he used to be fluent 3 years before the interview and he was at a B2 level. But since he did not speak it at all for 3 years, because he says this is the language I'm neglecting the most, so in which he does not put an effort, he could not come up with simple words. And he says, I didn't remember, because when you don't use a language at all, then it shrinks no matter your level. And I also asked them about the importance they attached to language maintenance. And I wanted them to do that on a Likert scale, so where very important was rated with a 5 and not important with a 1. Interestingly, participants, so as you can see here, find language maintenance very, very important. So the majority of them goes from very important to at least to quite important. And they also came up with intermediate values. So they said, oh, it's 4 to 5 or 3 to 4. And but all of them also gave an explanation for their choice. And in these explanations, although they were different, there were many commonalities. So you could see that the language maintenance, the importance that the speakers of so many languages attach to language maintenance depends, they said, on the on the goals they set themselves in the target languages and on the proficiency levels. They claim that they perceive it as less important if they have reached an upper intermediate or an advanced level. So, and they kind of pinpoint it at B2 level. Yes, a B2 level. If you know B2 or C1, then language maintenance is less important, which is quite in line with what the DMM had predicted. And then they say it depends on personal regions, on the time and energy resources that they have. And then they also said that this can vary in time and depends on the circumstances, life circumstances they are. But they say that language maintenance is of very high importance because they invest more time for the maintenance of the languages than in the time for the actual learning the languages. And one participant said, well, the term language maintenance is ambiguous because you never just maintain a language, but you also have to keep learning not just your target languages, but also your native languages. So maintenance and language learning cannot be really separated. I wanted to see also the role of the language maintenance, of the M factor in language maintenance. And here we can see that the M factor is not just important in language acquisition, but also in language maintenance, because it's thanks to this multilingual awareness that the participants are able to minimize the language maintenance effort, and all participants are able to define their proficiency levels and their language maintenance goals. Here is an example of Richard Simcott when he describes his goals in Polish. He says that then he was only interested to get to an communicational level A2, A1. He knows exactly how many words he would need to revise, and since he knows lots of Slavic languages, there are some 1,800 words are the same in all Slavic languages. So even before you begin learning a language of that family, you already have these words. And he says it very clearly. It's understanding what level you need and how much maintenance you can realistically put in. So for a language like Polish, which he speaks to, or then at least he speaks to a elementary level, he says, I would probably not revisit Polish more than once a year. Another way of organizing and managing time and energy is by creating maintenance habits. And Professor Alexander Argüelles certainly is the person that has the strictest maintenance regime. He had described it also in Michel Erard's book, Babel No More. But he said that since his life circumstances had changed, his maintenance habits in 2017, when I interviewed him, were different from the ones he had described. He still has a maintenance regime on a daily basis. Here he showed me the books, the Asimil books at C1 level for Arabic and Russian, which he was studying. And so each book has 70 lessons. He divides them in 10 sections per week. And so he sets a number of lessons for smaller units, so 15 to 20 minutes per language every day. He uses the same procedure for both languages. Then he engages in other activities, and then he does his language workout again. But for the languages he knows better, he does not study. He does not study them with books, but then or with grammar books. But he reads good literature. And also his philological languages are revised in a cyclical balance. So he reads books in Old Norse, then one in Middle High German, then another one in another dialect, as he calls the other classical languages of the same language family. Luca Lampariello, too, has a relatively strict maintenance regime. Again, he identifies the proficiency levels, defines if he is at the beginner, at the practice, or at the living phase of a language, and then he adjusts his language maintenance effort and the maintenance strategies accordingly. So at the beginner phase, he has to learn a language actively, and he does it 1 hour a day. In the practice phase, he has some knowledge and can express himself to a greater extent, but he still needs a tutor, and so has some lessons per week. And then in the living phase, these are the languages in which he has reached a high proficiency, and so which he can simply live and maintain them just by using them, and so with family, friends, and in the profession. Other polyglots, by the way, maybe do not have these regime that they follow so strictly, but still they are pretty much aware and go through the languages relatively systematically, but maybe not on a daily or on a weekly basis, but sometimes their time frame is a month, but they are well aware and seek out ways to practice regularly. So to me, a new emergent quality had emerged from the study of and maintenance of so many languages, and I think this is an emergent property in such experienced multilinguals, and I call this smart strategy or orchestration. This should be, I think, an additional component of the M factor, because here the experienced language learner are able to combine manifold strategies for language acquisition, maintenance, and management at the same time, and orchestrate them smartly through metacognition. and the dynamic effect that this has on their strategy deployment. I termed it, and I proposed the word enhanced strategy effect for it, since this would be similar in wording to the enhanced multilingual monitor. I tried also to taxonomy of the language strategies. I found two higher order strategies, and here I'm going to present you the higher order strategy, which I called minimizing language maintenance effort by maximizing language use. And here I have listed or identified lots of strategies, and I have found ample examples for how polyglots practice their productive skill in speaking, writing, reading, listening, etc. in daily life, in the profession, in the family, in the friends, and also in the polyglot community. And this is what I'm going to show you. Here are two excerpts from the semi-structured interview. One is by Elisa Polese, and then she says, "For sure, it helps me from the point of view of motivation, because twice a year, at least me, I'm going to polyglot events. When you go there, you always see that you never know enough. You think, I should improve this, I should improve that. Normally, the months after I've been to an event, I study more." And she laughs. And Alex Rowling says something similar. He says, yeah, it is important. So the polyglot community. I feel very motivated by the people from the language learning community. I feel very motivated to set myself new goals and to start new projects. And I like to see what they are doing. When you see how much they enjoy it, it reminds me that it's something that you really enjoy. I think without knowing so many other people who share the same passion as me, it would be harder to maintain it as a hobby. I identified several factors that are relevant in language maintenance. One is the love for language, which is certainly the most important one, the motivation, the learner autonomy, the attitude towards other languages and cultures, the empathy with other people via the languages, and personality traits of self-discipline and perseverance. When it comes to motivation, I asked about a question, what was the driving force behind it? And this was different in all participants, but the commonalities that they mentioned was that desire to connect with people on a deeper level with the interlocutor's native language, to understand the world and other cultures better, the pleasure of speaking and pronouncing new words, the improvement of oneself, and the awareness of the cognitive benefits from multilingualism. Only one spoke about the utility of multilingualism in the profession. Well, so you can see that all polyglots are subject to gradual language loss. They're highly aware of this phenomenon, and so they consider considerable, and they invest considerable time and effort into the language maintenance. But thanks to a smart orchestration of the strategies, they're able to minimize the language effort and maximize language use. And well, is this a mystical talent? I don't think so. It's certainly a quality that emerges due to the hard work they have invested in language learning and maintenance. And yes, can this be applied to the classroom? Yes, I think yes. I think that strategies are teachable, not as a ready-made set, and that one should and could learn from successful and experienced language learners of the past and the present, and should learn about the polyglot community and from their smart way of language learning if they want to become the mezzofantis of the future. And this is what I do with my students. I speak about the polyglots, I speak about my findings, I work as a teacher training, I am also the coordinator of the plurilingual curriculum in which we have established at our school, in which we offer modules, multilingual modules, and also strategy lessons. And yes, this is the link to my dissertation, should you want to know more, you can download it. It's accessible to everyone. I graduated from the Innsbruck University. And yes, now I would like to thank my traveling companions. First and foremost, Luca Lampariello, who was the polyglot, the first Italian polyglot that I have met, and which had opened me the way to the Polyglot Conference. And thank you, Luca. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, my lady polyglots, Helen and Elisa. Thank you, Jessie. Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Francesco, Fiel, Emmanuel, and Simon. And thank you, Andrei, Ivan, Dimitri, and Angelo. And also thank you to the 2 anonymous participants. Thank you all. You have made my journey to Ithaca enjoyable. And I would like to conclude with the words from the poem, "Do not hurry the journey at all, better if it lasts for a year. So you are old by the time you reach the island, wealthy with all you have gained on the way. Ithaca gave you the marvelous journey. Without her, you would not have set out. Wise as you will have become, so full of experience, you will have understood then what this Ithaca means." Thank you to everybody.